So I know the fretting and gnashing of teeth is sometimes obscure what's happening in real time, and maybe I'm guilty of this, right? Let's go back here because I want to start with the year. These are your election year markets, and for the last century, and this is 2024. There has not been a better market than this market going into Election Day. It's been absolutely phenomenal. But it's really odd, right? Because you don't necessarily feel it. Now, we know most of the year was all about those 7 stocks, but there's a lot more happening right now. Now, I think one big reason why we've seen this market this way, particularly recently, these gargantuan moves in earnings reports. I mean, if it's a good report, it's huge. To give you an example, the 5.2% reaction, the 5% reaction is the second best in history. Now, of course, it works to the downside, but every single day you're seeing stocks up 10, 20, 30, 40%, the average 5%, and that sort of gets the market moving big time. Also, let's realize when it comes to the economy, there's been a pretty magnificent shift here, right? And the shift has been sort of, hey, cyclicals are going to do well because the economy is doing well. I don't think anyone has recession on their horizon bingo card. And many, in fact, are joining the no landing camp. Now, this notion actually got a boost this morning. We have the ISM service report. Now, we know service is a much bigger part of our economy than manufacturing. Just take a look at this with me for a moment. The key numbers here to look at: employment. So last time employment was 48.1. Anything under 50 is contraction. Above 50 is expansion. So that was up absolutely big time. But another thing that was pretty good, prices came down. The only problem was at 58.1. It was a little bit ahead of what the street wanted. So inflation's still somewhat in the picture, but golly, this is an absolute great report. This is a good reason for the stock market to be up, not even thinking about the election. Speaking of the election, most investors are trying to gauge, okay, how's it going to, what's the outcome going to be? And of course, we've seen a lot of investing. Even today, look at Donald Trump's stock up through the roof ahead of the actual outcome. But here's a good cautionary tale for you, that even when you know who the winner is, you can still lose a lot of money. And by the way, it involves Sam Bankman-Fried. That's right. Sam Bankman-Fried and a team of analysts, they figured out a system of knowing who was going to win or who was leading before it was even mentioned on television. And, listen, the guy was a computer brilliant, right? So as they did this, they started positioning themselves in 2016. They're like, okay, we know what's going to happen. We know that Donald Trump is going to win. He worked for a firm called Jane Street Securities. So at one point, remember, the market was crashing. As the numbers came in and it looked like Donald Trump was going to pull the upset of a lifetime, the stock market was down. The S&P was down 6%. I think the circuit breakers went off on the Dow. And at one point, Sam Bankman-Fried and Jane Street were up $300 million. $300 million. They went to bed. They woke up ready to pop the champagne. And guess what? They were down $300 million. It was their worst trade in the company's history. And they knew who was going to win. So here we are amid a historic bull market already. We know there's going to be a new commander-in-chief. So let's discuss the various narratives out there. I want to bring in the Bianco Research President, Jim Bianco. Jim, just a fascinating story, right? Let's talk about what the market is telling us. And I want to begin with the notion that, listen, we know the market often zigs when everyone thinks it will zag. And back to this Bankman-Fried thing. He knew the outcome. And they made a big bet thinking, okay, well, we know Trump will win. The market doesn't want that. And they lost $300 million. What do you make of this sort of assumption based on the winners and losers of this election?
You got to be careful with that because we all tend to think that, there's one thing happening this week, and that is the election. And therefore, if I could figure out what the election is going to do, I could figure out what the markets are going to do. There's 2 problems with that. One problem is you don't know the reaction to the market. As you pointed out, and I remember that vividly, that night of 2016, election night 2016, where the stock market crashed and then recovered and was up big before the morning. So basically, that was the perfect outcome for anybody that bet the election they lost, because it probably scared everybody both ways.
Right.
And the other thing you got to keep in mind, too, it's not the only thing that's happening this week. We've got a Fed meeting on Thursday. We've got the Fed is going to cut rates. As you pointed out, we got the ISM services number, which is very strong. And it's really got people beyond the election going, Jay Powell, why are we cutting rates again?
Yeah.
What is wrong with this economy that needs this immediate monetary stimulus? And if you give us too much of it, should we be worried about inflation? So there's other factors in there besides the election.
Yeah, inflation too high, jobs going up, everything that counters the Powell argument. And I got to tell you, I don't know the next time they'll take the survey, but you're going to have a lot more company on the no landing island there. Used to be the only guy there. It's getting crowded like Manhattan. But let's talk about a couple of these proxies. And I want to begin with Bitcoin, because one thing you put out this fantastic chart that notes the daily ins and out, the money, right? Just a couple of days ago, we had a record amount of money that poured into Bitcoin, followed by a record amount of money that poured out of Bitcoin. So what's the story here?
I think Bitcoin has become a partisan coin. Donald Trump went to the Bitcoin Nashville conference in July. He came out fully for crypto. He said a lot of things that pleased the crypto community. It's great, except the Democrats have not followed through, and even though they were asked to do that. So it's perceived as a partisan coin. So just like DJT stock or the election betting markets, crypto has itself become another kind of way to bet on the election. And that's what I think you're seeing a lot of this money rushing in and out. I think it's election betting money.
Right.
And like we were talking about previously, be very careful, because there's more than just the election going on, even in crypto. And we'll have to see whether or not they wind up betting this one right. So they all rushed in last week when they thought Trump was going to win, and then Trump's odds went down and they all rushed out yesterday. We'll see if they're starting to rush back in today, because it's back up again big today.
And to that point, you mentioned the betting, right? You've covered the betting markets better than anyone. By the way, you've been covering them for a while. I had the CEO of Cautionary on yesterday. And what I thought was interesting about it, this is the way I was looking at it, and I think maybe I was wrong. I was looking at betting markets versus polls, and that betting markets would supersede polls after this election. But to see the Des Moines, Iowa poll influenced betting to that degree, I think I have to rethink this. So are these betting markets just instruments to trade and not necessarily a proxy or a referendum on who's going to win the election?
Well, they're a little bit of both. I mean, I think what the betting markets do is they start with the polls. Where are the polls? Who's got the probability of winning? And then they anticipate the next set of polls. And that's why, you heard this talk about manipulation, because they were trading way ahead of the polls. Well, that's because they were anticipating that Donald Trump's poll lead would increase. And then when it stalled out in the last 10 days or so, the betting markets have come back down. Trump is still trading at about 50%, but not quite as high as he was. And that's what things like the Iowa market did, was they were anticipating that they were going to see better polls for Trump. And then they got a poll that is respected that wasn't as good for him. And so that's how it kind of reacts. So, yeah, the betting markets are useful because they react to new news. So like when you have a debate, or you have a big event like a geopolitical event, and you wonder, what does that mean for the election? You can go to the betting markets and they'll give you a first cut, or you can wait 2 weeks until we ask people in a poll if it's changed their opinion. So that's the real purpose they serve for us.
All right. Hey, Jim, good stuff, my man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, so another